In the purport to Bhagavad Gita 2.40, Srila Prabhupada says the greatest fear is becoming an animal, and that by practicing devotional service, one is protected. Yet in other places, Srila Prabhupada says that devotees must be careful or they end up like Bharat Maharaj. Also, Bhaktivedanta wasn't fearful of being a dog in the house of a devotee. So, what is the greatest fear and what is protected by the practice of bhakti? Yeah, very thoughtful question. There are two things. There is the human form and there is the human consciousness, or rather the facility for spiritual consciousness that is offered in the human form. Now, the principle is that if somebody takes a step towards Krishna, if somebody starts practicing bhakti, then that spiritual attraction towards Krishna, that spiritual awareness of Krishna is never lost. It may be temporarily obscured in the sense of being forgotten, but it's never lost. So, that is one principle. The principle that whatever spiritual attraction to Krishna we have cultivated, that will always stay with us. And the speciality of the human form is not just the biological form. The speciality of the human form is the opportunity for spiritual advancement that it offers. So, having stated that, there is also another law. The law is what Krishna talks about in 8.5, 8.6. 8.6 he says that Yam yam va pismaran bhavam tejatyante kalevaram tam tamevaiti kaunteya sadatad bhava bhavitaha, that whatever state of being we remember at the time of death, that is what we will attain in the next life. Now, sometimes even in legal situations, in real life also, two laws might come in conflict. Suppose anybody kills another person, that is a crime. But somebody kills in self-defense, then that's not a crime. That's a different situation. So just as sometimes two laws might come in conflict, and then reconciliation has to be done. So like that, there can two principles. One principle is that one's spiritual growth is always protected. The other is that whatever we remember at the time of death, that is what we will attain. So how are these two principles to be reconciled? And that is, in the case of Bharat Maharaj, reconciled because he remembered a deer at the time of death, and because he had cultivated a lot of attachment to a deer during his life before that. So, according to the law of nature, he got a deer's body. But because he had practiced bhakti and had developed attraction to Krishna, although he got a deer's body, he did not get deer's consciousness. He still had human consciousness. In fact, more than human consciousness, because he still had his attraction to Krishna. If we look, as only a brief description of Bharat Maharaj's life as a deer, there he is doing primarily three things. He is lamenting about the mistake that he made in squandering the opportunity that he had in the previous life. Then he is warning himself, I should be cautious, and he is trying to seek, even as a deer, he doesn't go around seeking for green grass, but he tries to associate with the sages over there and tries to hear spiritual sound vibrations from them. So that means what is never lost is the developed consciousness which can help us keep moving onwards towards Krishna. Now when we say that in the animal life there is no opportunity for spiritual growth, what that essentially means is that there is no opportunity for one to begin spiritual life. But if a soul in a human body has already begun spiritual life, then even in the animal body, that can be continued. So what happened in the case of Bharat Maharaj is, both the principles had to be reconciled, and he got a deer's body, but he did not get deer's consciousness. So whatever attraction to Krishna we have developed, that will never be lost. In the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that Purvabhyasena tenaiva riyate ya avashopisah jigyasurapi yogasya shabda brahmati vartate. This Purvabhyas, whatever practice one has done in one's previous life, Purvabhyasena tenaiva, that person, he's talking about a yogi who has deviated from the path. Riyate ya avashopisah. Riyate, such a person will be helplessly attracted. Avasha. This person doesn't know. Yes, I just feel some extraordinary mystical attraction. I just feel attracted to spiritual principles. Feel attracted to Krishna. I want to know what are the ultimate answers to ultimate questions. So it's not that when we say a person say deviates from the spiritual path in the next life born, when we say spiritual attraction remains, that does not mean that when a baby is born, baby instead of crying will be born chanting Hare Krishna. Even if the baby is an advanced devotee, the baby, as per the biological nature, the baby will be born crying. But we will see that sometimes some people just develop attraction to Krishna so quickly. Sometimes two people may come to the same time at Krishna consciousness, but suddenly one person has so much stability, so much faith, so much attraction to Krishna. So what is happening is, in one case, say a person who seems to be advancing slowly, it is that the attraction is being developed for the first time. Whereas in the second case, the person who seems to be advancing very fast, that means the attraction is just being uncovered. It is already there, but just because of the circumstance of a death in a previous life and a rebirth in this life, there's a temporary covering over that, and that is removed. So what is preserved is our attraction to Krishna, and that attraction impels us onwards in the spiritual path. Now when Bhaktivedanta Thakur says that I am not afraid of even being born as a dog in a devotee's family, he says that Tomara Kukur Vaishnava Thakur, or he says Kita Janma Ho Yadatu Adas, that I am ready to be born even as an insect if I remain your servant. So what this essentially means is, these sort of prayers signify that which is normally considered fearful by people, a devotee doesn't consider it fearful, because the devotee is always connected with Krishna. So what he is saying is, if I am born in the devotee's family as a dog, or if I am born as an insect also, but I have attraction towards you, then the greatest danger in material existence is forgetfulness of Krishna. If I am protected from that, then even if other dangers come, such as the danger of going down to a lower species, that doesn't matter. Because the danger is not just getting an animal form. The real danger is getting animal consciousness. And if that consciousness, when may biologically get an animal form also, but if one still has spiritual consciousness, then that is not a danger. So that's what devotees are praying, or what happened in the case of Raj Maharaj's. The spiritual attraction was protected, but because of the alternate other law of nature, of getting whatever one remembers at the time of death, he got a deer's body. So whoever has asked the question, if the answer is not clear, or you have any further clarification on the answer, you can raise your hand, and then I can answer that. Otherwise, we'll move onwards. Okay. In the Bhagavad Gita 9.30, it is stated that even if one commits very sinful activities, still one is considered to be a devotee. One should be considered saintly. Does that mean that a devotee should not be judged according to one's actions, past or present, if one is a devotee, especially if one is seeking a relationship of faith and trust? Okay. If one is seeking a relationship of faith and trust, I suppose this means that we are considering whether a particular devotee is trustworthy, and if that devotee is, say, behaving in some immoral way, so should we not look for morality? This particular 9.30 has been a matter of enormous commentaries in our tradition, right? Starting from Sridhar Swami, Jiva Goswami, Vishwanath Thakur, Baldev Vidyabhushan, Ramacharya, Madhvacharya, all of them have commented elaborately on what this verse means. That even if a devotee commits sinful activities, still such a devotee is to be considered saintly. So I'll just go to Sanskrit, then I'll explain what it is. Api chet suduracharo bhajate mam ananya bhak sadhureva samantavya samyak vyavasito hi saha. So I'll just tell the 4 lines. And in itself, we will see a contradiction. We'll see how the acharas resolve that. Api chet suduracharo. A person commits a very sinful activity, very bad activity, suduracharo. And then bhajate mam ananya bhak. But that person worships me without deviation. Ananya bhak. Then such a person is considered sadhur eva samantav. Such a person is considered saintly. Why? Again, samyak vyavasito hi saha. Because the determination is well situated. Now the first 2 lines itself seem to be a contradiction. If somebody is bhajate mam ananya bhak, if somebody is worshipping me without deviation, then how can a person commit a sinful activity? And if a person commits a sinful activity, then how can that person's devotion be considered to be without deviation? So Sridhar Swami resolves this by explaining that he says this refers not to the performance of devotion, but to the object of devotion. That means the person may commit a sinful activity, but that person doesn't become disheartened in staying devoted to Krishna. That person doesn't think that, oh, because I have committed a sinful activity, now I am no longer qualified to worship Krishna. Or that person doesn't think that, oh, because while trying to do bhakti to Krishna, I performed a sinful activity, that means Krishna is not capable of protecting my sinful reaction, so maybe I should worship Shiva. Or maybe I should perform Ashtanga Yoga. Or maybe I should practice some other path. So here, this is one explanation that Sridhar Swami gives, that the Ananya Bhag or Samyak Vyavasita, the determination being fixed, means that the devotee, even when falls to some sinful activity, the devotee does not give up on devotional service. That's why I wrote a Gita Daily article on this topic. So I titled it as, we may fall down, but we don't have to fall away. We may fall down means we are going along the path, and because of conditionings, because of temptations, whatever, somebody does something wrong. But fall away means to give up the path of bhakti itself. So this is with respect to the Sridhar Swami's explanation that if a devotee continues determination to serve Krishna, yes, there is a lapse, that is a deviation. But that deviation does not make the devotee so discouraged that the devotee gives up practice. So that is what this means. Now, Baldev Vidyabhushan follows Ramanujarya, and he explains that the power of bhakti is such that even if a devotee commits sinful activity, if that devotee perseveres on the path of bhakti, then that sinful tendency will gradually be overcome, and the devotee will give up the sinful activity. And this verse is talking about the potential saintliness of that devotee. That devotee is considered saintly because eventually that devotee will become saintly. And that is related with Kshipram bhavati dharmatma shashvat shantim niyachiti kaunteya pratijani name bhakta pranashit. That's 9.31. Soon my devotee will become dharmic. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives the most fascinating explanation. He gives a very fascinating explanation of this verse. He says that actually there are three levels being talked about. Suduracharo is sinful. Then Bhajate ma mananya bhak is actually like a pure devotee. It's very advanced devotion. So, and then what it says in 9.31 is Kshipram bhavati dharmatma. A person will become dharmatma. So now why are there these three levels talked about over here? He's saying that somebody commits sinful activity, that means that is at the third level, lowest level. Somebody is undeviatedly practicing bhakti, that is top level. And somebody dharmatma, dharmatma is not necessarily bhakti. Dharma can be maintained dharma also. So how will a person who is performing ananya bhakti, why is that person considered dharmatma? Dharmatma means like punyavan. So papa, punya and shuddha bhakti, all three are there in the same sequence. So how do we reconcile this? So Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that this verse refers to the gopis. He says, from the world's point of view, when Krishna played the flute and called the gopis, and the gopis left their families and went away in the middle of the night to respond to Krishna's call. So from the world's point of view, this is Suduracharo. How can somebody leave one's family and go away to meet some other person like this? But actually, they were doing Bhajate Mam Ananya Bhak. They were performing unalloyed devotional service. And therefore, Sadhureva Samantave, they should be considered saintly because their determination was fixed in Krishna. And then he says, Kshipram bhavati dharmatma shashvat shantim nigacchati. He says that Kshipram, soon, who will become a dharmatma? Here he says this, the subject of the verse applies not to those who are doing durachara, but those who are mantavya, those who consider saintly. That means he says that those who consider the gopis saintly, just by considering them saintly, the people will become dharmatma. So they will become elevated. This is quite a Rasik explanation. He uses Rasik Ranjan. So the point I'm making from all these variety of explanations is that that this verse cannot be simplistically used as a license for whitewashing one's sinful activities. Whatever sinful activities I do, because I am a devotee, you should consider me saintly. Oh, that is not at all the mood of this verse at all. None of the acharyas have explained it like that. So, the essential mood is the mood of Krishna's compassion. The point of this verse is that a devotee gets hope that there is nothing that I can do that can stop Krishna from loving me. There is nothing, no activity, no matter how sinful it may be, that anyone can do that will make Krishna stop loving that person. But love is never one way. Now, Krishna's love is shown by his willingness to accept a devotee, even if the devotee does something very wrong. But our love for him, Krishna, for him is not shown by doing all wrong things. Our love for him is shown by trying to live as purely as possible. So a devotee doesn't see this verse as a license for doing wrong activities. A devotee sees Krishna is so loving, so accommodating, that even if I do something like this, still Krishna will love me. Why should I ever leave such a Lord and seek happiness anywhere else, seek love anywhere else? Let me just focus on loving such a Lord alone. So devotee sees this, the love evident in this verse, as an inspiration for intensifying with bhakti, not laxing, not making one's bhakti lax. Now specifically with respect to our conduct or our relationships, Vishwanath Chakravarti says that, if somebody is chanting Hare Krishna, if somebody is practicing the limbs of Bhakti Yoga, such a person should be respected as a devotee. But if that person's conduct is not proper, then such respect should be offered from a distance. We should not closely associate with the person. Because whoever we associate with, we get affected by those qualities. So if somebody is falling to some wrong activities, now if we are in a position of a close relationship already, or if we are in a position of authority where we can guide that person, that's good. Otherwise, we keep a distance and we understand that something is going on between that devotee and Krishna will take care of that. Or if it's our position, we can inform the guides or counselors who are aware of that devotee. But it is not that we have to turn a blind eye and whatever faults a person has, because that person is doing the activities of bhakti, so I should consider saintly. Now, our relationships have to be based on trustworthiness. So, if we just start trusting everyone just because that person is chanting Hare Krishna, now not only will our faith in that person be shattered, but our faith in the process of bhakti may also get shattered. That's why one of the things that is talked about is of a Kanisht Madhyam Adhikari. The medium level devotee is that the devotee discerns, who is at what level, and accordingly associates. So, if you want to develop any relationship, yes, that person's devotional inclination is important. But along with that, that person's trustworthiness is also important. If that person is behaving in the wrong ways, then we can respect that person as a devotee, but we can't develop a very close relationship with it. So this verse, we should use it to know that I should not become, so the word was used judged. I would say not judging. Normally the word judging conveys that I am at a superior position, just like in a court. A judge sits at a high position and judges others. So we never put ourselves in a superior position and think that, this person is like this person is like this. But we do need to discern. We need to discriminate based on what is best for us. So to understand this, we consider that this world is like a hospital. More specifically, Krishna consciousness movement is like a hospital. And different people have come with different infections. So I don't want to associate with someone to get the infection of that person. So I want to take treatment and I want to get inspiration for taking the treatment. So if somebody is infected in a way that is likely to be harmful to me, then I don't consider that I am purer than that person, I am superior to that person. But I am not in the position where I can benefit that person, nor is the association of that person going to benefit me. So I will respect from a distance. So relationship should also have not just the component of the external performance of devotion of a particular person, but also the conduct should be trustworthy. Does it answer the question? Asked it. Okay. Thank you. What is the relationship between intelligence and consciousness. How does spiritualized intelligence help in the manifestation of consciousness? As per Evam Buddhe Param Buddhva in the Bhagavad Gita. Evam Buddhe Param Buddhva Samstabhyatmanam Atmana Jahi Shatrum Mahabaho Kamarupam Durasadam. This is 3.43 in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says that with your intelligence situated on the spiritual platform, conquer the enemy of lust. So the first part of the question is, what is the relationship between intelligence and consciousness? Consciousness is the energy of the soul. Just like if I have this bulb over here, the bulb gives out light. So that we can consider, so it's a crude example, that bulb is like the soul, the light coming out from that bulb is like consciousness. Now imagine around that bulb, there is a film. Say if around that bulb there is a red film, the color that will, the light that will come out of it will be of reddish color. So like that, around the soul, there is the covering of the subtle body. And depending on the nature of the subtle body, the soul's consciousness gets colored, gets filtered. So accordingly, the consciousness is sattvic, rajasic or tamasic. Now, one of the components of the subtle body is intelligence. So our intelligence determines to a large extent where we focus the light of our consciousness. Now when our intelligence is alert, and your intelligence is active properly, then we will focus on things which are beneficial for our own spiritual growth, for our well-being. Just like if a person is driving a car, then if it's a dark lane, then the person should focus the car's street headlights on the road, that I can see where I'm going ahead. If the car's street headlights are focused somewhere else, there will be an accident. So the intelligence is that which determines where the consciousness will be focused. So when the intelligence is not very strong, then as per the mind's impulses, wherever the mind tempts, the consciousness gets focused on that. And the person will become more and more degraded. So the intelligence is what directs the light of consciousness, where it will focus. And when the intelligence is spiritualized, so evam buddhe param buddhva, then we carefully focus our consciousness on Krishna related things. Or if we have worldly duties, worldly responsibilities, we do those responsibilities without indulging in unnecessary temptations or distractions. So what Krishna says in this verse is evam buddhe, with your intelligence, param buddhva, know that you are transcendental. Param buddhva, know this. So buddhe and buddhva, that to me, buddhe means buddhi, buddhva means know. So know that you are transcendental, know that you are beyond the body, you are beyond the mind, you are beyond the senses, and situate yourself on the spiritual platform. So our consciousness is like our energy, and whatever we focus on, accordingly our consciousness will develop. So say if we look at a beautiful picture of Krishna, bhakti will awaken in our heart. If we look at a tempting sense object, then material desire will awaken in our heart. So what Krishna says is, use your intelligence to, by remembering that I am a soul, I'm beyond matter, use your intelligence to focus on spiritual reality. And in that way, you will be able to conquer lust. Thank you. Some questions are a little technical. I feel that they may not be so relevant to everyone. So I'll select those which are not so technical. Okay. Now there are some questions which are unnecessarily controversial. Okay, but I'll just comment some principles on this. Can you please comment on this observation? Prabhupada's message is getting diluted by some of the second generation. Example, popular Bollywood tunes are being used to sing the Mahamantra. So, how can we know if Prabhupada's message is getting diluted? And what cultural forms specifically comprise dilution? Now, first of all, I would say that we shouldn't be too quick to pass judgment on this. Why? Because every tradition has a core that remains unchanging. And every tradition has a periphery that keeps changing. And that has to keep changing. If it doesn't change, that tradition will no longer be a living tradition. That tradition will simply become an artifact in a museum. So a tradition has to always be contemporary. And being contemporary means that one has to relate with, address, present oneself according to whatever contemporary forms are there. So for example, Srila Prabhupada himself was very dynamic, right? The heart of our morning program is the Darshanarti. And right in that, Prabhupada has Govindam Adi Purusham in a Western tune. Isn't it? Now, what is this if not the resourcefulness of an Acharya? So now, some people think that being faithful to Prabhupada means just following the external forms that Prabhupada gave us. That can be one definition of faithfulness. But Prabhupada adopted many external forms because of his inner, resourceful, dynamic spirit of presenting Krishna Bhakti in a way that would be attractive to people. So being faithful to Prabhupada can also mean adopting that inner resourceful spirit and presenting Krishna Bhakti in a way that is appropriate, which will appeal to people. If you look at Srila Prabhupada, he said, I followed my spiritual master 100%. And yet, if you just study even a little bit of the life of Bhaktisiddhanta Swami Thakur and the way he presented things in Gaudiya Math and the way Prabhupada presented things in ISKCON, there are significant differences. Now, no differences in the central things, but there are many differences. In the Gaudiya Math, for example, they mostly have Gaur Gadadhar deities. Prabhupada established Gaur Nitai deities. So, in most Gaudiya Maths, we have the Guru Parampara moving like this upwards, from Prabhupada towards the previous Acharya. In most Gaudiya Maths, they have the Guru Parampara moving like this downwards. So, we can look at Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur would never print any pictures of any sacred images in his books. Prabhupada insisted on having pictures in his books. So if we just study our tradition, what happens is, if this Prabhupada is our Founder-Acharya, and definitely his position is preeminent, but Prabhupada is the representative of a tradition. And if we disconnect Prabhupada from the tradition that he has given us, then we misunderstand Prabhupada and we misrepresent our tradition. So Prabhupada has to be seen in the context of his tradition. So now I gave certain examples. I won't go into technicalities of each of those things. But Prabhupada had his reasons for doing what he did. And the essence of that reason was, what would be most appealing to people? So he put books in his pictures, pictures in his books, because because pictures would attract people. And those pictures, people look at the book, people look at the plates, and then they say, I want to know what is in the book. So Bhaktisiddhanta Swami Thakur did not put pictures in his books, because at that time, that was not the common standard. That was a time when Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur's books were mostly distributed in India, and Indians at that time at least, had a very special reverence for sacred images, and the thought that somebody may throw a book away and the sacred picture may fall on the ground, and then that will be great offense. There are many different considerations at those times. So, if you see, before Srila Prabhupada, in our whole tradition, nobody emphasized Bhagavad Gita as much as Prabhupada did. Jiva Goswami's primary work that he wrote on was Srimad Bhagavatam. Baldev Vidyabhushan's primary commentary was on Vedanta Sutra. Bhaktivedanta Thakur's primary contribution was his explanation of the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu based on Chaitanya Charitamrita. Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur's primary contribution was his Gaudiya Bhashya, his commentary on Bhagavatam and CC. Before Srila Prabhupada, yes, many acharyas quoted Bhagavad Gita, but none of them emphasized Bhagavad Gita as much as Prabhupada did. When Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur sent his disciples abroad to Europe, at that time, they used the book Sri Krishna Chaitanya, that was co-authored by Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur and one of his disciples, Nishikant Sanyal, as their primary preaching book. That was the primary book that they would distribute. And many devotees they made it all based on that book. So Prabhupada chose Bhagavad Gita. Why is that? Now, easy if he said that I am following my spiritual master as it is, and he's choosing an entirely different book. Not that Bhagavad was not quoted, it was never made the central focus of the preaching. So the point which I'm making by all this is that we cannot have a simplistic idea of diluting Prabhupada's teachings just because some forms are adjusted according to time, place, circumstance. Prabhupada himself adjusted forms according to time, place, circumstance. Because when Prabhupada went to the West, there are multiple reasons. Because of various historical circumstances. The Bhagavad Gita had somehow become very respected in India as a Hindu counterpoint for the Bible and the Quran. And many political leaders were using the Bhagavad Gita to propagate their own ideas. So Prabhupada said, I'll give the pure Siddhanta Bhakti based on Bhagavad Gita. And in the West also Bhagavad Gita had become very popular. People were interested, not very popular, but people were interested. So as compared to say Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, these were unknown books. If you look at Bhaktivinoda Thakur, his primary preaching was in Bengal and Orissa. He wrote books for the Western audience. He had Western audience in mind, but he wrote mostly in Bengali. And he himself directly did not reach out to Western audience. Bhaktivinoda Thakur's main audience was Indians. He did have a vision of reaching out outwards. So my point I'm making is, tradition is never a collection of frozen formulas. That, this is what has been done by Acharya, this is what we all are meant to do. Yes, we are all meant to love Krishna and we are all meant to inspire others to love Krishna. But those who have followed Prabhupada for many years, those who have a sincere desire to share Srila Prabhupada's message, they will know by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada how best to present Krishna Bhakti. And rather than making a very straight value judgmental statement that Prabhupada's teachings are being diluted, we have to understand the time, place, circumstance. And we have to, if we have certain questions, maybe this particular thing is a dilution, then it is best to go and ask those devotees who are doing this. What is the reason for doing this? And if we feel that it is a dilution, then we don't do it. But if all of us start judging other devotees like this, then two things will happen. First of all is that we will become judgmental and we will start fighting with each other only. If you look at European history, there were, just before the scientific revolution came, scientific revolution in the 16th, 17th centuries, after Newton and Copernicus, before that, what were Christians doing? There was a scholastic tradition, and there was something like 10,000 pages of material written, debating whether the angels in heaven have hands with 5 fingers or 6 fingers. We laugh at this, but who knows, 100 years down the line, people will laugh at us. You are saying that, should Hare Krishna be sung in this tune or this tune? You're singing Hare Krishna, Baba. Isn't that enough? So, I feel that we shouldn't be too judgmental about this. If we have questions, better to clarify from those sources and not make blanket accusations like this that Prabhupada's teachings have been diluted. Better be safe. We may think that I am being faithful to Prabhupada, but we may end up offending the faithful followers of Prabhupada by saying that they are deviating. Now, it is of course possible that deviations can happen. But at least I feel we shouldn't imagine that I am a self-appointed watchdog in the moment. We follow what inspires us according to our understanding of bhakti, and we move onwards. If certain things we feel, I don't feel inspired to follow it, I don't feel this is right, that's fine. Now, with respect to the specific question, I would say it depends on time, place, circumstance. Now, I mostly do outreach in India. So maybe a few years ago, for the first time when mantra rock was introduced in India, there's a lot of debate. Should mantra rock be introduced? Mantra is sacred. Why do you want to use rock music with that? So then there's a lot of discussion. Then my understanding is this and this, that the principle is we need to remember Krishna. So now, for us as devotees, if we are habituated to hearing the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, then if we hear mantra rock, we don't remember the mantra, we remember the rock. But for people who are already attracted to rock, now they are already hearing the rock, when they get the mantra through the rock format, they focus on the mantra. So we have to see whether a particular form of the presentation of devotional service, is it stimulating remembrance of Krishna in people? So for some particular form, so for example, if I have heard some Bollywood tunes, and now I hear the Hare Krishna mantra in that tune, then I may remember that Bollywood song. But there may be so many other people for whom that Bollywood tune may not be an issue at all. And ultimately, it is, if we really think, it's quite possible that Bollywood did not make that tune. That tune also existed before, but we came to know of that tune because of Bollywood. So now, is it that because once Bollywood used that tune has become devotionally untouchable for all of eternity? So ultimately for these things, I think the best principle is anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjana. What is favorable for our bhakti, we do that. So if something helps new people or devotees in promoting their remembrance of Krishna, then they can do it. But if something we find it doesn't remind us of Krishna, it reminds us of something else, then we avoid it. That way we can protect our bhakti and also protect ourselves from offending others. Thank you. Okay. How do you understand and explain statements on women in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, such as women are less intelligent and hence not trustworthy? Now, first of all, the statement about women being less intelligent or not trustworthy, this is not in Bhagavad Gita directly, it is in a Bhagavad Gita purport. Although there is purports are illuminating the Bhagavad Gita, there's a difference and we need to recognize that difference. So now, this can be, if taken out of context, used to show that, this Bhagavad Gita and this whole Hindu culture, it's all anti-women. It is, repressing women. It is all anti-women. But then, we have to have the complete picture. In that same culture, from which we are extrapolating this one side when women are less intelligent, the deity of intelligence is a woman. The deity of intelligence is Saraswati Devi. It is not a man, it's a woman. So we can't take one statement out of the context and use that for judging the whole culture. So now if we look at less intelligence, what does it mean? Firstly, there can be material intelligence, there can be spiritual intelligence. Now spiritually, it is very clear that all souls are same. Now every soul is a part of Krishna. Mamevamsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana. So the soul at a spiritual level is neither male nor female. So that less intelligence doesn't refer to spiritual intelligence, definitely. Now, does it refer to material intelligence? Now, if you see that psychologists classify material intelligence in different categories. Now, there can be linguistic intelligence, there can be mathematical intelligence, there can be spatial visual intelligence, there are different kinds of intelligences. But broadly speaking, we'll see that actually it's not a universal observation in any way that women are less intelligent than men. Many times women, if they're given the opportunity, they may outperform men academically, by career-wise or whatever. So if it does not refer to spiritual intelligence, if it does not refer to material intelligence, then what does it refer to? So essentially, if you see the overall worldview that Srila Prabhupada gave, his focus was the sign of intelligence is understanding one's spiritual identity. Less intelligence means misidentifying with the body. So, in general, everybody in the material world misidentifies with the body. But usually, for a female, the identification with the body is much more, unless one becomes very spiritually advanced. Because quite often, for a woman, the sense of self-identity, sense of self-worth, it comes largely from one's appearance, one's looks. Now, this is not, I'm not in any way saying that this is the way society should be judging, but it's just the way it is. So because of that, the probability of identifying with the body will be much greater in a female body than in a male body. But that does not mean, so essentially what this refers to is not spiritual intelligence, not material intelligence, but the misidentification of spirit with matter. And this is not meant to in any way or form denigrate women. Because in Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, specifically if we see, there is many disciples of Srila Prabhupada, even lady disciples. And I've talked with many of them also, and they said, we never felt in any way that Prabhupada treated us like less intelligent. Prabhupada encouraged us, and Prabhupada inspired us. So Prabhupada never discriminated against us in any way, never treated us as less intelligent. So then what does this mean? So first of all, if we see this less intelligent statement, as I said, it's not directly from the Bhagavad Gita, it's in a purport. And what Srila Prabhupada is stating, if we look at the broad, generally Prabhupada uses the intelligence very rarely, if at all, ever in the sense of academic performance. In fact, Prabhupada always, even if he talks about academic scholars, what he says is that scholarship is not a means for understanding spiritual substance. So he's not referring to material intelligence at all. And he's very clear spiritually, there is no difference between the soul in a male body or a female body. So this is simply referring to bodily misidentification. And if a person practices bhakti, the person rises beyond bodily misidentification. So it's important, very important, that an Acharya's teachings be understood in the context of his life. So, dharmasya tattvam nihitam guhayam mahajano yena gatah sapantha. That the principles of dharma are very difficult to understand. And they are hidden in the hearts of the great devotees. And their hearts are expressed through their actions. So, Srila Prabhupada taught us practically, by his own example, how we should conduct with each other. So, unfortunately, when Srila Prabhupada's personal example is divorced from his teachings, and then if whatever he has written in his books, if that is emphasized, then that leads to a lot of misunderstanding. Not only misunderstanding, but also it misrepresents Srila Prabhupada. Because Srila Prabhupada, such a statement can be used to say that Prabhupada was anti-woman. But if you look at Prabhupada's own life, he did what very few people in his times did. Prabhupada gave second initiation to women. Prabhupada appointed women in leadership positions. Prabhupada had women giving classes, women leading kirtans. Now what Prabhupada did in terms of empowering all his disciples, male and female, for preaching. There was, in 1967, roughly Srila Prabhupada had a severe stroke and he went to India to get treatment. And after that, when he came back, the devotees welcomed him. And then in the house, in the flat where they were there, so there was a globe. And Prabhupada, all the devotees are welcomed in, all his trusted disciples were there. Prabhupada said, so see, the earth is so big. All of you take one country and you deliver that country. So Jadurani Mataji, she asked Prabhupada, Prabhupada, what about us girls? Prabhupada said, we are not girls or boys. We are all devotees. You also take one country. You also take one country and go and deliver. So Srila Prabhupada, if we want to understand him, if we just take statements out of the context, then we will misunderstand him and we will deprive ourselves of the practice, of the opportunity to practice bhakti. So, if now, I cannot take into account all the sociological implications of this. If we think, if we are males and we think that women are less intelligent, and we have a right to look down upon them, then the biggest problem is that we are less intelligent. Because we are seeing them more as women and not as devotees. So we should treat everyone as devotees first. And we should respect everyone. So if we are women and if we find that certain men are disrespecting us or certain men are looking at us as less intelligent, then we should know that this is a situation where I have to choose my association. So just don't associate with those people, those devotees, and find other devotees who will inspire us to move onwards in our bhakti. And if while reading Srila Prabhupada's books, such statements come out and jar us, then it is best if we can interact with some senior Matajis, where many of Srila Prabhupada's lady disciples are still there in the moment. You can interact with them. And they have been reading Prabhupada's books for maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And they have probably come across the statements many more times than we have. And still they are remaining faithful to Prabhupada. So what is it? Is it that nobody likes to be a masochist, liking to be beaten oneself? Now, yes, I'm less intelligent, I'm less intelligent. Nobody likes to hear such a thing. But the fact that so many devotees are still continuing on practicing bhakti. That means the Prabhupada that they are loving, the Prabhupada that they are dedicating themselves to, the Prabhupada that is inspiring them, is not the Prabhupada for whom this is like any very important teaching. So we can interact with such Matajis and try to get clarification for this. But important principle is that we should not let anything come in the way of our bhakti. So such statements, which if we find anywhere in Prabhupada's books, we should see, actually all of us, based on our conditionings, or based not just on our conditioning, based on our background, all of us may find different statements at different levels of objection. So somebody who is, say, a scientist, Prabhupada is sometimes very heavily criticizing scientists. So then that person may always find it jarring. So what do you do at that time? So now again we have to look at Prabhupada's statements. Prabhupada's statements about how to deal with scientists. So when devotees organize a scientific conference, Prabhupada said you should be polite, you should be courteous. So there is a way Prabhupada dealt with people, and that is often not reflected in the writings. So that's why what do devotees like these do if the devotee is a scientist and that the devotee comes across constant criticism of science? Now one has to go beyond and look at what is the principle. The principle is Prabhupada is criticizing the atheism that is propagated through the prestige associated with science. And we take that principle and leave aside the details and move onwards in our bhakti. So for us as devotees, it is very important, this fundamental principle, anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjanam. Accept that which is favorable, reject that which is unfavorable. So if even in the books that we read, maybe scripture, if there are certain things which we can't just put them aside. And there are many other things which will inspire us, which will benefit us, which will uplift us, and we practice that and move onwards in our bhakti. Okay. I hope this answers the question. I'm not initiated, but I'm confused between two spiritual masters. What should I do? First of all, it's important that we not let the confusion slacken our bhakti. Because to the extent we practice bhakti seriously, to the extent Krishna will see our sincerity and reciprocate and guide us. Dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mamupayantite. So to the extent we practice, sometimes confusion is also a temptation. That means if something is confusing us, then we think about it more and more and more, then we become more and more confused. So whenever certain decisions have to be taken, decisions require a certain amount of sattva guna. And usually when the decision is right in front of us, our mind immediately goes into rajoguna. Should I do this? Should I do this? Should I do this? And then from rajoguna it quickly goes down to tamoguna also. So therefore, it's important that serious decisions, we should not just leave it at the level of the mind. That means, first of all, as I said, if we keep practicing bhakti, we'll rise from the lower modes towards goodness, and we'll be able to think more clearly. And further, it's most important that if we are confused between two spiritual masters, we let our thoughts settle down for some time. That means we maybe keep a journal, write down what is it about a particular spiritual master that inspires me, what is it about another spiritual master that inspires me, and keep going back to that after a week, maybe after a fortnight, after a month, and add things, change that. Writing a journal is often very helpful, especially when we have to make serious decisions, because that journal entry becomes like a snapshot of our mind. It's like whatever thoughts were there in our mind, whatever factors we are considering, we have them outside preserved as a snapshot, as a photo. And then we go back, okay, I was thinking like this, but this is not very important. This is important. So I didn't think about this. So like that, if we keep deliberating and praying on the decision, over a period of time, we will come to Krishna will guide us onwards. So I would say three things in this. First is, don't let confusion become a cause for becoming disheartened in bhakti. Rather focus on intensifying the bhakti, then try to cultivate the mode of goodness while contemplating things. And usually, if indecisive thoughts are there in the mind, they just keep going round and round and they congest the mind and you're not able to do anything. So get those thoughts out, and just getting the words out and looking at them. brings a greater level of objectivity to our thinking, a greater level of clarity to our deliberations. And then we can take a decision. So while choosing a spiritual master, there are many factors to be considered. The most important would be how much we feel inspired to practice bhakti by that spiritual master. It's not just how nice classes that person gives, how much wonderful kirtan that person sings. All these are important. But the most important is, because ultimately, yes, the spiritual master is our deliverer, but the spiritual master delivers us by inspiring us to practice bhakti. So we should feel inspired by that person to practice bhakti. And the spiritual master is also not to be seen alone. The spiritual master's association we get through our God family, the God brothers and God sisters. So if somebody says this, I feel inspired by my spiritual master, but I don't like any of his disciples, then we will not really be able to sustain our bhakti. So we have to see, firstly, whether that spiritual master inspires me. And then if I'm going to join that God family, then I also should be inspired by the God brothers and God sisters. And then we can take a decision. So firstly is that don't let confusion discourage you in bhakti or make you slacken your bhakti. And by intensifying bhakti and trying to cultivate the mode of goodness, then Krishna will guide about how to move onwards in life. Thank you. Okay. Sometimes we invite some people to come for our programs, and then they say they are busy, and that work is worship. So how do we respond to this? If work is worship, then the donkey is the greatest worshipper. Actually, I read there are many popular quotes which are attributed to the Gita which are nowhere in the Gita. So work is worship is among them, one of them. Many people say this comes from the Bhagavad Gita. Now, I love reciting the Bhagavad Gita. I must have recited the Gita thousands of times till now, full Gita from beginning to end. But I never found any verse which states this. The closest that comes is in 18.46-47, where Krishna says, Swakarmana tamabhyarcha. It's not work is worship. By your work, worship him. It's a very different thing. Swakarmana, by your work, worship him. Tam abhyarcha, worship that absolute truth. Now, I'm not here saying that the principle that work is worship is entirely wrong. Yes, the slogan work is worship was used or is used also to imbue all work with a sense of dignity, and that all work we should do carefully. We should not consider some work as low and some work as high. So yes, if it is seen in that spirit, that we should not look down on any labor, but we should give due dignity to all forms of work, that is good. But if it is made as a devotional principle, and if it is made as a devotional principle that is used to replace worship of God, then that is wrong. And further, if it is treated as a teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, that is definitely wrong. This is not the teaching of the Gita. So I am not denying the utility of the principle in a particular context. But it is not a spiritual teaching, certainly not a teaching of the Gita. So what the Gita teaches us is that by our work, we should worship the Lord. What this means is that we human beings have many dimensions to our life. We have our families, we have our jobs, we have our own health concerns. And the principle of bhakti which Bhagavad Gita teaches is that bhakti is not just a part of our life. Yes, there are some activities which we do where we exclusively focus on bhakti, where we come and chant the holy names, we study scripture, we associate with devotees, focusing directly on bhakti. But through these direct devotional activities, we are meant to take the spirit of bhakti and infuse it in all other activities, including our work. So by your work, worship him. That does not mean that I take my laptop and start doing Aarti of Krishna with a laptop. I think that is, by my work, I am worshipping him. No, that means that, it means that we do our work in a mood of worship. And this mood cannot be cultivated. It will not be authentic unless we are actually spending quality time connecting with Krishna. Like some people, we tell them, please chant the holy names. They say, oh, God's name is going on 24 hours in my heart. Well, if something is going on 24 hours in the heart, why can't it come out 1 minute on the tongue? So, in no other field, in no other field will we accept this argument. You know, if a husband says, to his wife, I love you, but I will never express it through any action, but it's in my heart. In no relationship will be considered authentic if everything is kept only in the heart. Now, if something is in the heart and it never comes out, then it's a safe conclusion to say that thing is not there in the heart only. Sometime or the other, it has to come out. This idea, so as I said, bhakti is meant to permeate our whole life. But bhakti can permeate our whole life only when bhakti has permeated our heart first. And bhakti will permeate our heart only when we devote quality time for practicing bhakti exclusively. That means we exclusively chant the holy names, we exclusively come to the temple, worship the deities, we hear the philosophy, and then there will be a mood of bhakti in our heart, and that will come in our work. So, rather than work is worship, if you want to talk about the Bhagavata's teaching, you can say work as worship. Means do your work in a mood of worship. Work is not automatically worship. Work has to be made into worship by bringing a devotional consciousness into that work. And that devotional consciousness also has to be cultivated by practicing devotional service in a focused way. So, otherwise, now we may be doing our work very dutifully, but that does not make us spiritual. Yes, doing our work is good. It's our responsibility. We have a career. We would like to grow in our career. All that is good. But that does not make us spiritual. What makes us spiritual is our efforts to rise to spiritual consciousness. What makes us devoted to God is the devotional connection that we have with Him in our heart. And so, if people say that they're busy, yes, everybody is busy in life, but then nobody works 24 hours a day. Everybody takes some breaks. Those people who say, I'm too busy to come to a temple, if you go to their homes at the time when a temple program is going on, probably they'll be watching television. So, they have time to watch TV. Nobody works all the time. So, one important thing to recognize is, it's a false dichotomy to say that my worship time will take away my work time. Because we don't work 24 hours a day. Our worship time will not take away our work time. It will take away our worry time. Now, what do you mean by worry time? Now, do we have a time? Every evening, 7 to 8, I'm going to worry. No. Worry, it saps our energy. Like a nagging, if you have a nagging headache, you feel like a nagging noise in the head, spinning in the head. So like that, worry saps our energy constantly. And if we focus on trying to cultivate bhakti towards Krishna, then that connection with Krishna will bring a sense of security, a sense of shelter. And that will decrease our worry substantially. Just a couple of days ago, I gave a seminar on the anxiety epidemic. And there, researchers have shown that in general, although people in the developing countries have more reasons to be worried about, but many of them don't have food, clothing, shelter, they're much more insecurity. So people in the developing countries have more reasons to be worried about, but people in the developed countries are more worried. Anxiety and anxiety disorders are found much more in the developed countries than the developing countries. Why? Because in general, the developed countries tend to be more and more materialistic. And because they're more and more materialistic, the material world is always shaking. So there is so much uncertainty because of that. And that causes worry. But to the extent we connect with Krishna, to that extent our mind will become calmer. And we'll be able to get more done. So just like if a boat is on an ocean, the boat will just keep moving up and down because of the waves. But if the boat is anchored, something heavy, unshakable, the boat's movement will be much lesser. Similarly, the time when we worship Krishna, that is a time when we anchor our consciousness to the supreme unchanging reality. And that will bring a substantial amount of calmness in our life. And with that calmness, we will be able to do even our work better. There's one problem with this argument that I have no time. No, we evaluate the availability or non-availability of time only in terms of activities. Okay, this time I have to do this, this time I have to do this, this time I have to do this. We evaluate the availability or non-availability of time in terms of activities. But actually, the consumption of time is not only in terms of activities. It is in terms of thoughts. A student may say, okay, I am studying. But a student may 1 hour in front of the textbook, but if the mind is caught with something, there's a cricket match going on, what is the score? What is going to happen? And I want to go on. That 1 hour, that is wasted by that thought. So quite often, if we just evaluate our time according to activities, we misunderstand how much time we are spending where. Because thoughts consume our time. And the kind of culture we live in, our thoughts often tend to go wild here and there. But when we practice bhakti, when we connect with Krishna, when we practice mantra meditation, our thoughts become calmer. And the waste thoughts that are invisible time consumers in our schedule. If I get disturbed, if I get too angry about something, then I may be at my job, but I don't get the job done. And then I have to work overtime to get the job done. But if I could calm myself down, then I could have got the job done in the same time instead of having to work overtime. So what bhakti will do is, bhakti will give us the mental calmness and clarity by which we will not entertain waste thoughts. We'll be able to drive away waste thoughts and we'll be able to do whatever we do in a focused way. So work is not worship, but we can work as a worship by giving quality time for exclusive worship. And that worship time will not go away from our work time because it will take our worry time, not our work time. Thank you. On Saturday in the Srimad Bhagavatam class, you said that better to live wherever you are and do Krishna consciousness rather than to go to Vrindavan and be offensive. But in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Prahlad Maharaj tells that sadhu manye survare dehina. One should go to Vrindavan and take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in old age. How to understand this? Yes, we should take shelter of Vrindavan, but we shouldn't reduce Vrindavan to only a specific geographical location. Vrindavan is most importantly a state of consciousness. When Prahlad Maharaj says, you should go to Vrindavan, the point is that you should devote yourself to the Supreme Lord. And by Prabhupada's mercy, by Krishna's mercy, wherever there are temples, there Vrindavan can manifest. So whenever scripture gives any injunction, there is the specific injunction and there's a universal principle underlying that injunction. And yes, if we feel very inspired by Vrindavan, if we can get the association of devotees there, if we can truly take shelter of Krishna there, that is wonderful. Then one can go to Vrindavan. But we shouldn't reduce bhakti simply to the form of going to Vrindavan. My point was not that we should not go to Vrindavan. My point is that we should actually understand the principle of going to Vrindavan, that is to take shelter of Krishna. And we have to find, it is not that simply by going to Vrindavan we will get the shelter of Krishna. Wherever we can practice bhakti best, wherever we have the association of inspiring devotees, that is where we will be able to get the shelter of Krishna. Thank you. I have been given a service to look after and work with another devotee, but he does not seem to like me. And has even told me directly that he finds it difficult to listen to me. What should I do to improve the situation? In case he is here, is there something he can do? Okay. We have two relationships. We have a vertical relationship with Krishna and we have a horizontal relationship with others. And others also include devotees, other devotees. So now ideally, these two relationships should be symbiotic. Now our relationship with Krishna makes us more loving, more humble, more tolerant, more sensitive, and that improves our horizontal relationship. And our horizontal relationship, if the others are also devotees, then seeing their devotion inspires our vertical relationship also. Now this is the ideal situation, but quite often, this is not the situation in real life. So at such times, what we specifically do will depend on time, place, circumstance. But the principle is, we should not forget our vertical relationship because of a problem in a horizontal relationship. That means even if somebody is dealing in an improper way with me, my response shouldn't be only to that person. My response should be in my relationship with Krishna. A devotee is not interested in retaliation with another. A devotee is interested in reciprocation with Krishna. I'll give an example to explain this. Suppose there's a cloth shop where, say, clothes are not only displayed, but in many cloth shops there are cloth assistants there are people who come and show you, okay, this dress is here, you can try this dress out. And there is the cloth shop owner. So there are some customers who are very fuzzy. Now they will come to a cloth shop, try hundreds dresses and not wear not purchase even one of them. Now for the salesperson over there, that can be a very frustrating experience. So now, if that salesperson is only going to look at that customer and think this customer wasted so much of my time, then that salesperson will become snappy or disrespectful toward that person. But if the owner of that establishment is also there and the owner is observing, and the owner will see this salesperson is so courteous. Although there was cause for provocation, this person did not get provoked. This person is very courteous. I can trust him. He will take care of my customers in future. So, similarly, Krishna is like the owner in our heart. And the people whom we deal with are like the customer, some of whom may be irritable. So, what we should focus on is not just how another person deals with, and our relation should not be just tit for tat. You did like this, I will do like that. No, our relationship should be what conduct will please Krishna in this situation. Because for this, even for the salesperson, the salary is not going to come from the customer. The salary is going to come from the owner. And the owner sees, this salesperson is very courteous. You will not only get a salary, you may get even a promotion. So like that, whether our relationship with others works out successfully or not, that alone doesn't determine our spiritual advancement. Our spiritual advancement is determined by how we try to please Krishna in that situation. If Krishna is pleased, then we advance spiritually. Now, this does not mean that we have to tolerate abuse in the relationship. What it simply means is that we don't have to reduce that relationship to only that person's behavior. So, now if this particular situation is there where we have to do a particular service, then we'll have to see what is the level of workability. Now, when we say we should tolerate, now tolerance, what does it mean? Tolerance doesn't mean that we let ourselves be trampled upon by others. Tolerance simply means that we don't let small things come in the way of big things. We tolerate small things so that we can move forward in big things. That means if I want to practice bhakti, I want to serve Krishna, and okay, there is this irritable person, there is this problem, there is that problem, I won't let that come in my practice of bhakti. So tolerance, what it means is, we don't let small things come in the way of big things. But then, every person is different, every situation is different. So what might seem like a small thing for me, may not be a small thing for someone else. That might be a very big thing, because everybody has different natures. Everybody is in different situations. So, if such a situation is there, if we can work thinking that this is a situation where Krishna has put me, where I can become purified by working with a person who is not very agreeable, because ultimately, Krishna sees the sincerity of our efforts. Even if nobody notices, Krishna notices. Chakshur yasya narishyati. That Krishna's eyes never close. So Krishna always notices. If we are doing sacrifices, if we are doing austerities in his service, he's going to notice it. So, if we can see that as an opportunity for purification, we can take that and do the service even in that situation. But if the purpose of all services is to remember Krishna and move onwards towards Krishna. So, if a particular devotee's behavior is such that we become too agitated by that, and we just can't focus on Krishna in that situation, then we can go to our authorities and tell them, I find it very difficult to work in this situation. Can you give me some other devotee to work it, or can you give me some other service? it's not wrong to express our feelings. We should, and if we have strong concerns, we can express that strongly also. And then after that, we leave it. If the authority says, no, we don't have any other devotee, you do the service with this devotee, we can tolerate it for some time. The point is that if we focus on that vertical aspect of the relationship, then we will be able to deal with even unfriendly people in a reasonable way. And beyond that, it's often that most people who come to Krishna, they have a core level of sincerity. Because at least in Krishna Bhakti Ashla Prabhupada has given us, there are quite a lot of regulative principles to follow, quite a lot of rules to follow. Now, people will not do that if they don't have a core level of sincerity. So if somebody says, I don't like you, we can find out what it is that causes that friction. And maybe sometimes we can change something, or it might just be a perception about someone. So, okay, you spoke like this, so I'm thinking that you are like that. Then we clarify, no, when I spoke like that, it was like this. So communication can help in getting clarification. So, or even if that doesn't work out, then we can say, okay, this particular part of my behavior you don't like, then I'll try to minimize that. And we adjust along and move onwards. So the important point is if we just let that person come in the center of our consciousness. This person doesn't like me, this person doesn't like me. Then we are not Krishna conscious anymore. We become that person conscious. And then we won't grow in bhakti. So, let that person, even if that person is unfriendly, we can continue our Krishna consciousness and with the guidance of senior devotees and using our own intelligence, decide how best to move onwards in that situation. And regarding that devotee, that devotee can do anything, as I said, the most important thing is try to get some clarification. And if that devotee is not satisfied with our clarification, then we can ask that devotee to go to some senior who knows us, and the senior devotee may give some additional perspective about us, so that the two can work together. We should not let anything discourage us or distract us from Krishna. Whichever devotees we are working with, that's temporary. But our relationship with Krishna is eternal. And quite often, the difficulties in the temporary relationships force us to grow. And they force us to take deeper shelter of Krishna. And that is always auspicious. Is it always good to be humble and meek and patient while dealing with materialistic people? Yes, but we need to know what is humility and what is weakness and what is patience, exactly. Now, if we think humility is often thought of as weakening, but that is a misunderstanding of humility. Essentially, humility means that we are not centered on how much we are respected. Prabhupada defines humility in 13th chapter, 13.8 to 12. There is a list of qualities that comprise knowledge. Amanitva and Nambitvam. There says humility means to not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. It's a very profound definition. To not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. So what Prabhupada means over here is that whether I am honored or not, that should not be the primary basis of making our decisions. Then what should be our primary basis? Our primary basis should be how best can I serve Krishna. So it's not that in humility means we again let other people trample us. Prabhupada was sharing Krishna consciousness in India. And he tried it for 30-40 years. People were not very receptive. Now, Prabhupada could have said, because people are not listening to me, I am learning humility. And he could have continued in India all the time. But a devotee's center is, how best can I serve Krishna? And for my service to Krishna, I will not let my ego come in my way. But if I think humility means I let others trample on me, and then my service doesn't get done, that is not humility. So Prabhupada went to America. Now when Prabhupada is expressing his desire to, whoever we would meet, if that person was a little interested, Prabhupada would tell them, I have a desire to share Bhagavad Gita's message in America. And many of the people would have thought, this Swami is unknown. This person doesn't even have a place to stay. This person has no disciple and such big dreams he has. What kind of sannyasi is he? He's thinking, I'll go to America. People may have thought him proud also. But what was Prabhupada's humility? When he went to America, he went to the most degraded place in America at that time. From the Brahminical perspective, America itself is a land of degradation. But the hippie area was degraded even according to American standards. So, Prabhupada went there. And what did he do over there? He cooked for the hippies. Not only did he cook for the hippies, they would eat food and they thought this is just like a restaurant. So they'd walk away out of there. And Prabhupada would wash their plates. So, what is his humility here? Whatever is required to keep my service going on towards Krishna, I will do that. So why was he doing all this for his Western disciples, those who later became his disciples, some of them? Because he saw they have some spark of Krishna Bhakti. They have some interest in hearing about Krishna. So let me fan that. Whatever is required, I'll do that. So essentially, humility means that what is to do that which is favorable for our service and to not let our craving for respect come in the way of our service. So, with respect to materialistic people, what is speak of materialistic people? Even with respect to devotees, if in the name of humility, we let our service get stopped, then that is not actually humility, that is a disservice. So, our center should be how best can I serve Krishna. And if we are in a situation, we live in a competitive world today. So, we have to prepare our biodatas. And when you prepare our biodatas, often we prepare your CVs, it's like you have to blow your trumpet as loudly as possible. Now we may say, how is that humility? But the point is, humility is not a virtue that is to be divorced from the purpose of life. We want to serve Krishna. For serving Krishna, we require a certain profession, certain job, certain career, certain position in society. And whatever is required to do that, we see that as a service to Krishna. And we do that. So, humility essentially means to not let our ego come in the way of our service. It does not mean being passive. It does not mean letting ourselves be trampled by others. It does not mean not being assertive. It simply means doing whatever it takes for our service and not letting our ego come in the way of our service. That is the primary focus of humility. Yes, in our speech also we can see what are the mannerisms which might come off as proud, as arrogant, and we try to avoid that. But we shouldn't think of humility as something which will make us powerless. Actually, humility makes us powerful. Why? Because when a person is not humble, that person is always filled with the anxiety whether people will respect me or not. And the person's actions are almost always determined, they are restricted. I can only do those things which will give me respect. So a proud person, actually pride or arrogance, I want to make it more specific, arrogance is actually a very miserable condition. Because, if I'm arrogant, if I come inside a room, the first thing I will see is how many people have noticed me, how many heads have turned towards me. And if nobody turns towards me, actually nobody has done anything, but I'll be miserable. So, arrogance, the craving for respect from others makes us very dependent on others. And it makes us very miserable actually. Whereas humility frees us from that dependence on others. So our decisions are determined, when we are humble, our decisions are determined by our principles. Whereas, when we are lacking in humility, then our decisions are determined largely by others' perceptions, not others' responses to us. So you did not respect me, I will show you who I am. So our whole purpose, what we came to do, we forget that. So humility is a power, and what is that power? That power is, it enables us to stay focused on the things that are important for us. And if we understand humility in this way, then we will not let something which seems like humility come in the way of our service, whether be it in our association of devotees or in the association of materially minded people. Okay, one last question. Why is it that even after studying Shastra and starting Krishna consciousness, we still have a desire to enjoy materially? Why do we still think that we can be happy in this world? There are two different things over here. First is the purification that happens through bhakti, and the second is our expectation of what should happen by bhakti. The two are not always the same. Bhakti, whenever we start practicing, it purifies us. So every mantra that we chant, every shastra, every sentence in shastra that we read, every sentence that we hear, it is all contributing to our spiritual purification. There is a contact with spiritual sound. So we are growing by that. But the problem often comes is that we have an unrealistic expectation. We think that because I am practicing bhakti, material desires should disappear. World desires should disappear. No, that's not what Krishna says. In Bhagavad Gita, in 5.22, Krishna tells Arjuna, Yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukkha yona yevati. Adyantavantah kauntena teshu ramate buddha. That worldly enjoyment will lead to misery. Therefore, intelligent people, Buddha, do not indulge in this worldly enjoyment. Then, Acharyas explain that at this point Arjuna gets a question. He says, Krishna, I know that worldly enjoyment will lead to misery. But still, the desires don't go away. What should I do? So Krishna says, Shaknoti haiva yasodhum praksharir vimokshanat kama krodhodbhavam vegam sayuktah sa sukhi naraha. He says, Shaknoti. Arjuna, it's possible for you? Shodhum, tolerate it. Tolerate the desire. What should you tolerate? Kama krodhodbhavam vegam. The urges which are born of lust and anger, tolerate them. And he says, if you tolerate them, sayukta sa sukhi naraha. Such a person is well situated, such a person is happy. So what Krishna is saying is, he's not assuring the disappearance of material desires, he's calling us to tolerate material desires. What this again means is that by the practice of bhakti, what will happen is not that the desires will disappear immediately, but they will become tolerable. But we do have to tolerate them. So as I told, temptations will come, we don't have to welcome. It is not that when a temptation comes, we should show a red flag, not a red carpet. So sometimes we come, because the temptation has come, now I have to indulge in it. No, sarva dharman parityaja mayam ekam sharanam vraja. We don't have to do like that. Just because some temptation has come, I have to indulge in it. No. Temptation comes, we can tolerate it. And the easiest way to tolerate it is by redirecting our consciousness towards Krishna. So, what will happen by the practice of bhakti is two things. If we keep practicing bhakti, our consciousness will move more easily towards Krishna. More habitually, more naturally towards Krishna. And secondly, the temptations will not seem so tempting. They will not seem so difficult to resist. But the temptations will be there. There is that famous verse of Yamunacharya, where he says that when I get material desires, I spit at the thought. So now, we often hear this verse. The important point is, Yamunacharya is a pure devotee, and even he is saying, I get material desires. So, even a pure devotee can get material desires. But what is different is the response. If we get material desires, probably we don't spit, our mouth starts watering. So, if we are in this world, nobody can move around with closed eyes. So there will be perceptions which will come in, and the perceptions will temporarily trigger some desire. But we can moderate our response. So a simple example will illustrate this. Suppose a person is trained to become a firefighter. And young firefighter goes for the first time, has just joined the firefighting team, and there's a call, there's fire over there. And the person is enthusiastic, goes there, and suddenly there's a huge fire. And the person just picked up the fire, just drops it in horror, and becomes panicky. What has happened? The first perception over there, that has just caused panic. Now, if the fire is huge, it's alarming, even a trained firefighter may feel a few moments of panic. But as there is more and more training, as there is more and more experience, then the panic time decreases and the right response becomes faster. The right reflexes are established. So immediately the panic will be suppressed, and the training that is there, that will switch into action. Immediately the person will pick up the hose and start pouring the water and extinguish the fire. So material desires are like fire. Dushpuren analenacha. Like fire that burn in our consciousness. So when they burn in our consciousness, when we initially come to bhakti, we have the firefighter, we have the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, we have the bead bag. But when temptation comes, we drop the bead bag. In our panic. But the difference is, if the fire is there, the fire can get lit in anyone's consciousness. But then, when there is a seasoned firefighter, just that person immediately pick up the hose and start pouring the water. So similarly, as the devotee becomes more trained, as the devotee becomes more seasoned, more experienced, then immediately, when that fire comes, that doesn't mean that I let the fire burn, but I immediately take the hose and pour water. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And if we like this take shelter of Krishna, not only will the temptation get extinguished, but also our own faith in the potency of the remembrance of Krishna to free us from temptation will increase. And in that way we'll grow in our spiritual life. So bhakti's purification is happening, but we should not have that expectation that there'll be no more temptation. Rather, what we can expect is we can get shelter from temptation if we turn towards Krishna. So if we do that, then we will be able to go onwards in our bhakti without discouragement. Last question. No? Okay. Sometimes some senior devotees look at me and simply ignore me. And I find it very disturbing. What should I do so that I can overlook these things? There are different situations in this case. Firstly, this is the experience of everyone. I have also gone through this experience. And it could be because of multiple reasons. The most common reason, in my experience, is that those devotees are just caught in their own thoughts. It's not that they intentionally neglected us. Just caught in their own thoughts. If somebody is a senior devotee, we expect them to be more courteous, more warm. And that is, yes, we can expect that. But senior devotees also mean, quite often they have more responsibilities. They have often big things on their head. And they may not be able to reciprocate with everyone that they meet. So we should not always think that just because someone has neglected me, somehow that person is angry with me, or I'm good for nothing, or something is wrong. It just, yes, senior devotees have often, the more you become senior, the more the expectations from others become more. And it's sometimes very difficult to deal with all those expectations. So we should not always presume necessarily that the devotee is displeased with us or anything like that. But if it happens repeatedly, then at some other time, we can approach that devotee and seek a clarification. Prabhuji, Mataji, this is what happened repeatedly. Have I done anything to displease you? Have I offended you in any way? And if we have some reasonable relationship with that devotee will tell us also, no, don't worry about this. Or the devotee may say, you did like that, that's why I was annoyed. And then we can clarify or we can apologize, whatever is required. So there is no need to let our imagination go on a hyperdrive and let it paint all worst case scenarios. First is if it happens just one time, then no need to worry about it. If it's happening repeatedly, seek a clarification. And if suppose that senior devotee is not so easily accessible, or somehow we cannot get clarification, then we can go to some other devotee and ask. When somebody is a senior devotee, sometimes even senior devotees have their own, not just their responsibility, they may also have their anxieties, they may also have some problems. And they may be going through certain situations because of which we may not realize what is actually happening. So it's best not to take such things personally. And over a period of time also, we will find that there are certain devotees with whom we will gel. There are certain devotees whose natures and our natures match, who we find they care for us. And in that association, we get inspired and we move onwards. So we can focus on developing relationships with them, because we cannot change others. So if some senior devotees, every devotee, as I said, every devotee has only 24 hours. Every devotee is different people. There is something which is called as a social stamina. So social stamina basically means that, how many relationships can a person sustain? Some people who are introverts, even one interaction with one person, that drains them. Some people can just talk with 50 people and still have a bright smile on their face. In fact, the more people they talk with, the brighter the smile becomes. So different people are simply different. So we don't have to take somebody's seeming negligence as necessarily a sign of the problem in our relationship. We can find out those devotees with whom our relationships work, with whom we click, they say, and focus on developing those relationships and move onwards in our bhakti. So, as Rupa Goswami says, Sajatiya Asha Snigdha Sangha. Look at he says two things. Snigdha is affectionate. Sajatiya Asha is those who have the same category of desires that we have. So normally speaking, the best way to get association of devotees, what association is, to assist them in their services. So if we want, that means there are two different things over here. There is, if we value a devotee's association very much, then we cannot just go on always expecting, that the devotee will always spend some time and talk with me. We assist them in some service that they're doing. Then naturally we'll get their association. But if we find those devotees are doing a particular service which we don't feel inspired to do or which we don't have the talents to do, then we should look for some other devotees association. So if we have a specific interest, we are interested in a particular service, then we can look at some other devotee who is also interested in that service and then try to develop associate relationship with that devotee. So if we become too sentimental about who is behaving how with me, then we will just stay on the mental platform a lot, worrying about this, worrying about that. Certainly we want to please devotees, but we want to please devotees so that we can become steadier and stronger in our bhakti. So if with certain devotees the relationships don't seem to be working out, then Krishna has given us a large society. We can find out some other devotees with whom relationships work. And it's not that we disrespect or reject the other relationships. It's just that those relationships may be at a slightly greater distance. So, anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjanam. Accept those relations which are favorable, and those relations which don't seem to be so favorable, keep them at a distance. Now, Prabhupada said that when he was asked about relationships, Prabhupada said, you should cooperate with each other. But cooperate assumes operate. When you are operating, then you can cooperate. So that means all of us have to keep serving Krishna, and while serving Krishna, we try to be harmonious. So if things don't work out so harmoniously with one devotee, there are other devotees with whom we can work out. The important thing is we keep moving onwards towards Krishna, and we don't have hostile feelings towards anyone. Our life is too short. Our consciousness is already filled with so many anarthas. We don't want to have negativity towards any devotee or negativity caused by any devotee to further fill our consciousness. We want at least some place in our consciousness for Krishna. Already there is so much lust, anger, greed, envy, pride. And on top of that, there is resentment, there is anger, there is irritation, there is hatred. Well, in the place for Krishna. So, if some devoted relationship is working in such a way that it is taking up too much of our consciousness and not giving us room for Krishna, then better keep that relationship at a distance and focus on those relationships where we can bring Krishna closer into our heart. So by keeping Krishna the center, even in our devotee relationships, we will be able to find those relationships which help us to move onwards, and we'll move on towards Krishna. So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki.